Okay, now for something completely different. We're doing a Vinland Saga chapter review today. Why? Because I want to. I've just been on a Viking kick the last few weeks. I think it honestly started when I saw The Northman a couple weeks back, and oh my god, insanely good movie. Go check it out. It was one of those movies, it was like a long movie, but it didn't feel like a long movie. It just like naturally flowed really well. Alexander Skarsgård does a great job in the lead role to showcase like the brutality of the Vikings, but also a little bit more of the softer side as well. And I watched a lot of videos just talking about like how the film was made and how it built up everything, and like trying to take and like the religion of the Vikings from that era and the weapons from that era and try to get everything as accurate as they could. So go check it out. Also, no spoilers for the movie itself, but those of you that have seen The Northman, because I was watching the movie in the theater and I sort of had this thought as well. It is sort of like the plot of Vinland Saga, right? Like, not to go into, like, specific plot points, because this stuff was even revealed in the trailer of the movie. It's about a kid whose father gets killed, and then he leaves and then joins up with a group of, like, Viking raiders, and then goes on a quest of vengeance for his father. I mean, like, that's a common trope that's used a lot in various fiction, both modern and, like, historical fiction. Like, that's around there, you know, like the whole idea of, like, you know, this group of people killed one of my parents or both my parents or burned my village down. Therefore, I will live the rest of my life seeking vengeance. And then he grows up, gets super buff, and then drives a sword right through the person's skull who did it, you know? And at the end of the day, it's like, was the vengeance worth it, or was it not worth it? I mean, that's a common trope, but even so, the fact that the premise of a movie about Vikings was very similar to Vinland Saga, I'm sitting there watching this and I'm like, okay, all right, I see where you're going here. I don't know, but it was a good movie. Check it out. So yeah, there is no new Vinland Saga chapter. Last month, I guess, the one in April did not come out. Yukimura, he actually tweeted about this, which, by the way, if you don't follow Makoto Yukimura on Twitter, go ahead. He's a funny dude, but also he'll, like, give, like, updates to what happens with the manga, and he missed the deadline last time, and he, like, apologized, like, deeply, and it's like, Makoto Yukimura, do not worry about it, man. You are doing a phenomenal job here. Take as much time as you want. It's fine. But yeah, so this will be chapter 192. Let me just move my microphone over. I make that mistake a lot. I'll have something on my second monitor, and I'll be speaking over here, and you can't really hear me because of the microphone. So just keep it on the screen in front of me here. And this is Thousand Year Voyage Part 1. So this is kicking off what I believe to be the final saga, as it were. The final arc, the final string of chapters of Vinland Saga. So we'll just do Thousand Year Voyage Part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think with the war in the Baltic, we got up to like 36, so we could be here a while, okay? We could be like Thousand Year Voyage Part 32 or whatever. We could be here a while. Then there might be like an epilogue chapter or whatever, but yeah. And especially, let's talk about the last few chapters really quick. So the last chapter that day was an insanely emotional roller coaster. It was a great ride. It's pretty much just like Thorfinn receiving his happy ending. Like, if Vinland Saga were to have ended in the last chapter, I would have been okay with that, because it's like, alright, everything's good, they founded Vinland, Gudrid is pregnant, Hild forgives Thorfinn in just one of the most beautiful, like, it'll probably be a while until that scene is animated, but with the sunset and her saying, you know, I forgive you finally, you have atoned in my eyes, I forgive you for your deeds, and Thorfinn just that look of disbelief on his face, and then he just breaks down weeping, is just so damn powerful, right? But it was like his happy ending right there. But it's like, okay, the manga's still going, so when's that shoe gonna drop? Oh, man. All right. So we start off this chapter with Thorfinn and Einar, and they're lifting up what's called a cenotaph, all right? And it's basically just a stone monument, a very simple stone monument. Sort of looks like a tombstone nowadays. And they're just, you know, digging a hole in the ground, and they're lifting this super heavy stone into the ground and making sure it's secure, it doesn't fall down or anything. And the only thing that's written on the cenotaph are 5 runes, and they make the word Frieder, I think, and that is the Norse word, the Old Norse word for peace. And Carly's there, and Carly's sort of helping, and she's just like, what does that word mean, Dad? And then Thorfinn is like, oh, well, this is the only word, or these the only letters or the only runes that I know how to like actually draw or write or inscript into something, and it just means peace. And it's very fitting that that's the one word that Thorfinn would learn, is peace, given the fact that like that's what he's been vying for all this time. So normally the cenotaph is like sort of like a tombstone, but not really. It's meant as like a memorial to console the dead, all right, to like put the souls of the dead at ease, I guess, is what they're going for here. And because that's the only word that Thorfinn knows, though, he's basically putting it up as a monument to every single person that he has killed. All right, so all of those nightmares, the night terrors on night terrors on crack, basically, he's been having with all the zombies, like, Thorfinn, you killed us! This is his attempt at basically putting those to rest. And he's like, we don't actually know the names of everybody, but, this is the cenotaph for many people whose names I do not know, and I hope this is enough. I dedicate this land, Vinland, to you in the name of peace. All right, and we get the title page, 1,000-Year Voyage Part 1, where we see Thorfinn and Einar there just kind of paying respects in front of the cenotaph. Carly's there doing, like, handstands, just playing around. Carly's mom is there. It's a peaceful place where they have grown wheat, where they have, settled for about, I don't know if it's been a year yet, but it's probably been getting pretty close to that. Well, they arrived in the late summer, I think, and now we're in the spring, so we probably got to be getting close to a year that they've been there. They arrived at Vinland, and so everything seems to be going okay. Okay, well, you know what? It's great because it doesn't start with just, like, something bombastic, like, oh no, the village is being attacked or whatever, somebody's lighting stuff on fire, it's nothing like that. It's a very subtle kind of ease, but it also gives you a sense of dread of what's happening next. So we have Vargar arriving back, and he's the captain dude. He's like the big pirate dude that's like, hey boss, how you doing? So he arrives back. I love this guy. He shows up and he's just like, oh, hey boss, how you been? And Thorfinn's like, oh, we've been good, check it out, we got wheat, we got more houses, everything seems to be doing okay, how are you been? And he's just like, oh, same old, we've been all right. Everything's ready for harvest. You guys are great. And Thorfinn's like, yeah, we'll have a lot of, because remember what he's doing, Vargar, what he's doing is he's taking, the supplies and stuff from Vinland, also making trips back to Markland and then, Greenland. And so they're just basically traveling back and forth from the settlement, right? And so he's like, yeah, everything's good with us, except there is a little bit of a bad news I have to break to you here. So Thorfinn's like, huh? And then it just cuts to them kind of off to the side of a hut or one of the houses, having this conversation in private where he's like, yeah, something happened in Markland. And we don't know exactly what, but basically when we were traveling by there, we were going to make stops there to, take goods and deliver stuff and just see how the people there are doing. I think it was something like 12 or 13 people that stayed at Markland because they decided, hey, we don't need to go as far south as Vinland. It'll be okay just right here. It's a lot nicer than Iceland, if nothing else. It's not the greatest place to grow massive wheat fields or anything, but there's a lot of trees, which to somebody that, lived in Iceland and Greenland, a place like Markland that just has a lot of trees would be like, wow, this is perfect. Why do we need to go further south, right? So they started their own little settlement there, and it was a smart move that Thorfinn, decided to agree to because it's like, well, if something happens and one of our settlements is wiped out by disease or something, at least we'll have another area that'll be untouched. So that's a good idea. But now something has apparently happened to Markland, and when Vargar and his crew were about to stop there 18 days ago from their route back from Greenland, an arrow came from the shore and slammed right into the side of their boat. And Vargar's not an idiot, so he's just like, yeah, that I took that to mean don't land here. Like, that's whoever was the one that fired that. Remember, the Lenu, or the, by the way, I might be mispronouncing everybody's name here, so I apologize for that, but, the indigenous people that live there, which is a different group than Polmuk's group, they're like, yeah, they're really sharpshooters when it comes to bows and arrows. I mean, they're really good at that kind of stuff. So I feel like, and I even saw comments about this, like, if they wanted to hit somebody on that boat, if they wanted to, like, try to aim to kill, they could have done that. But instead, they just aimed to hit the side of the ship, and they only fired one arrow, too. They could have fired a lot more, okay? So they fired the one arrow, and Vargar's like, yeah, that kind of, I get the message. The message is, do not land here. You are not welcome here. leave, okay? And so he's like, I didn't want to risk the crew, so I decided just to come back to Vinland instead. So they still have the arrow, and so Thorfinn inspects it, and he's like, this is the Lanu, this is their arrow, right? And so they're like, I want to, next time I go back to Greenland, I definitely want to stop there to make sure they're okay. And Thorfinn's like, tell you what, I know you're tired from your long journey, but get a ship ready because I'm going back right now, and I want to see this from my own eyes. I want to see what's going on there because Thorfinn, he feels responsible for everything, and he's like the head of, not really the leader, but he sort of is the leader, but not really. And he's like, I have responsibility here. I want to make sure they're okay. So they run off. Meanwhile, Ivar was listening to that entire conversation. He was off to the side of the house, just really cool, just like leaning up against the wall, just like hearing everything that happened. And he's just like, I'm going to, Thorfinn, I'm going to, because, I can't be, leaving this to you. I'm getting ready for war. Because he's like, hey, this is pretty cut and dry to me. There was another tribe of the Lanu that were more north in Markland. Might have been the same tribe even that attacked the original Vinland settlement that Leif arrived, and then his son arrived and also got attacked by what they called them, the Scrowlings back then, but the indigenous people there. And so he's like, I'm getting ready for war. This is cut and dry. There's another tribe up there that's way more warlike than the one we've met down here, Polmuck's group. So I got to be ready for anything, okay? So then we just cut immediately. You got to keep in mind that there's like a lot of time that's passing in between here. Just going from Vinland to Markland is 8 days of travel on sea. I can't even imagine that. Like, the idea of being on this tiny little boat for 8 days is insane, right? But hey, I mean, that's the culture back then. It was a very seafaring culture, so they're probably all used to it. It's just insane. It's like, all right, let's get ready for war. Load up the ship, get in the ship. All right, shove off. Like, Ivar and Thorfinn, did they talk at all for 8 days? Did they have a conversation? Chat about the weather? I'm just saying it was probably very awkward on the boat for 8 days. Anyway, 8 days later, they arrive at Markland, and they see the settlement. The settlement's still there, and they kind of, like, cleared out some space to make houses and everything. And so he's like, yeah, the arrow came from that location on the shore right around there. And so Thorfinn's like, okay, just stay back from the shore. We don't know what's going to happen. Give me a pot and a stick. And they're like, okay. And so Thorfinn takes this big giant cast iron cooking pot and this giant stick and just starts banging the shit out of it. And everyone's like, what are you doing? And then they kind of pay attention to the settlement. And we just see, like, a little deer, like 2 deer, like, popping out of the area and just, like, running into the woods. And so Thorfinn's kind of like, ooh, that's sort of grim, because the fact that there's deer in the settlement means there's no people in the settlement. Either the Norse or the Lanu, there's probably nobody there. So they land, and Thorfinn begins to inspect, and there's really no sign of, like a raiding party, there's no sign of, like, people setting fires or, like, blood or, like, anything. They don't find any trace of the people that live there, any of the 12 or 13 settlers. They don't find any, like, pieces of clothing or blood or, like, a hacked off arm. They don't find anything like that. The houses and everything seem in good condition. The only thing is the entire settlement has just been filled with arrows. As if the Lanu just took a bunch of arrows and bows and they just fired them into the settlement. There's like dozens, hundreds probably, littering the entire area. The ground, the fence posts on the houses themselves. And so they're looking around and they're just like, this is so weird that they would just leave these arrows all over the place. So once again, this is intentional. This is not just them like there was a battle here. What's more than likely is that the Lanu did something with the settlers in Markland and then fired all these arrows after the fact. Basically, because they knew that there were ships that dock there routinely, and so they was like, okay, we're gonna do something with the colonists, with the Norse, and then after that, we're gonna fire a bunch of arrows to let anybody else that comes close to this settlement know to stay the fuck away. All right, we don't want you here in this area. Get out. All right, so that's definitely what the implication is, and it's the same thing that happened with the original settlement that Leif had. Okay, or Leif's son had, I should say. So now we cut. This is kind of scary because now it cuts to nighttime, and Thorfinn and Vargar and Ivar and all the crew, they're just hanging out by a fire on the land, like near the settlement, and Thorfinn is just banging the pots, and I'm just like, they could easily, like, we don't know what this other tribe is like. They could literally just be in the darkness and then just fire off a shit ton of arrows, and it's in the middle of the night. You won't be able to do anything. You're lighting a fire. It's like a beacon for, like, hey, come here, fire arrows at us. We're right here, completely defenseless. But I guess they're all pretty confident that that won't happen, or they'll be able to sense if that happens. And Thorfinn even mentions, he's like, I can't sense anyone around. Either there's nobody in reach of the sound, or they can hear us, they're just not doing anything. They're ignoring us. So he's like, I just want to talk to them. And Ivar's like, are you telling me you speak Lanu now? And he's just like, well, no, I don't know a lot of words. Bug Eyes knows a lot more than me. But, it's incredible what you can accomplish just through, like, facial expressions. And I think he knows, like, enough of the language to, like, enough that Thorfinn would be able to introduce himself. He would be able to introduce himself. He'd be able to maybe mention Polmuk's tribe from the south, so, like, maybe they know each other. And, like, the rest can be based off of, like, facial expression and, like, body language and stuff. And so Ivar is just like, oh, just normal field of flowers in your head, thinking everything's gonna be okay. Like, look around. It's pretty abundantly clear, Thorfinn, they don't want us here, okay? You can see what happened. They killed all of the settlers here, dragged their bodies off, and then they littered this place with arrows to let us know that if we were to stay here, if we were to try to repopulate this, or if we stayed in this region, in Markland, they were going to kill us. Okay, so that's Ivar's perspective. Meanwhile, Thorfinn's like, hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. We don't know anything about what happened here, okay? We can't find any blood or anything. We don't know what happened, all right? Maybe they left, they went somewhere else. The boat is gone because they left a ship there for the people of Markland. The ship is gone as well. So they're like, hey, maybe they left and tried to get to Vinland, but they lost their way because the people in Markland don't know the route to Vinland, okay, to Prince Edward's Island, which is what it is nowadays, actually, contemporary Prince Edward Island. So they don't know how to get there. And so they're like, maybe the Lanu came out and then fired arrows to get them out of there, and they all like, oh shit, and they all grabbed their stuff in a hurry, and they got on the boat, and I guess they might have tried to make it back to Greenland, or tried to make it to Vinland, but they didn't, Vargar didn't cross them on the way there, and maybe they got lost. So there's a bunch of stuff going on here. There's a bunch of situations. I have a theory, but we'll get to that later, okay? A couple of theories, actually. So it's like, if they're out there somewhere, we'll find them, don't worry. And so Thorfinn is very optimistic, of course. He's like, I'm thinking our friends from Markland are alive somewhere. However, we can't devote all of our ships to just patrolling the Atlantic Ocean, you know what I mean? Like, area around it. We just don't have enough manpower. We don't have enough ships for that. So we have to probably return to Vinland at dawn. That's our best option. So at this point, Ivar gets up and is kind of just staring down Thorfinn. Thorfinn's still sitting on the ground, and Ivar gets up, and he just, like, there's very, very intimidating glare where his whole body goes out into, like, silhouette. And he's just like, this is your fault. We lost 13 people and a ship because of your attitude, the no weapons. If the people of Markland had weapons, they would have been okay. I still debate that, because the whole point was Leif's son went to Vinland, and he was a little bit more like a typical Viking, and he probably instigated a conflict with the native population, and he got killed. So, and they had weapons too. Ivar is just like, hey, we have iron. They don't even know what iron is. Therefore, we would win. I think that's a little bit, even on Ivar's part, he's being a little bit too like, oh, we would have easily won. But still, he's like, we lost 13 people. They're probably most likely dead right now, and it's all because of you. All right, so this is more about Ivar just, I think, trying to get Thorfinn to admit that he's wrong. I think that's a very important thing to Ivar's character. Like, he's just trying to get Thorfinn to sway to his way of thinking, and Thorfinn's also trying to get Ivar to sway to his way of thinking, and they're just butting heads constantly, which is the major, and I don't know if Ivar is a villain. I would say maybe more of an antagonist of this arc, but in the situation of just like, hey, you need to have weapons in order to have a functioning society, and Thorfinn's like, I don't want a place with weapons, and it's just they're butting heads. So Vargar tries to break up the fight, but Ivar's like, hey, listen, I know you're thinking it the same way that I am. If they had weapons, they'd be okay. Yeah. However, Thorfinn is just there, and he's not really saying anything. He's not responding to him. Ivar just walks away, and then Thorfinn's just there sitting by the fire, and we see the last scene of the chapter of him facing the opposite direction, just like, he's sweating a little bit. He's trying to figure out what to do next, if everybody's dead or what happened. And then that's the end of the chapter. Next time is the same fate awaiting Vinland, because remember, they have to get back on that boat, and it's another 8 days back down to Vinland. So they've been gone for 16 days total. That'll be almost half a month, over half a month, really. And all the crazy shit that could happen in that time period. Now, yeah, they have people back at the settlement that can fight and stuff, but still, this is going to be tough. So the general idea I get from this is that the shaman who had the vision, which, by the way, let's talk about that for a fucking moment. So that was insane. And okay, so there was a chapter back during the Baltic Sea War, and it's one of the most, I can't remember the chapter number, but it was a very prominent chapter. It was the chapter when, one of Thorkill's men is dying, and he has the image of like, okay, I'm dying, my vision's getting blurry, I can't hear anything anymore, I'm ready for the Valkyries, the Valkyria, to come down and guide me to Valhalla, right? And that doesn't happen, and he's just sitting there like, wait a second, it's going dark. Where are the Valkyries? Was it all a lie? And he's like, oh my god, I'm going to see Valhalla. The Norse, mythology is going to be real. And it turns out it's not real. And it's like, oh shit, I'm just going to die. So he dies, right? And so then, but we have the thing with the shaman a few chapters ago where he does this ritual and he legitimately sees the future. So that makes me wonder if it's like, now, it's not the same thing as like, okay, he saw the future, like a divination sort of thing, so therefore their religion is accurate, but it's kind of a thing where it's like, I wonder where Makoto Yukimura is going with this, where it's like, okay, the religion of the Nordic people is not happening, it's not real, but the religion of the Lanu is actually the real thing, because he legitimately saw the future. Like, it wasn't some hazy picture of the future. No, he saw the American Civil War, he saw the testing of the Trinity bomb in freaking New Mexico, of a nuke going off. Like, he witnessed this in his future, okay? He saw, like modern farm machinery and shit, and it's like the Great Plains of the U.S., like all the cornfields we have. He saw all of that perfectly, okay? So I'm thinking the shaman probably alerted all the other tribes that he travels around in the area that, like, these Norse, these people that have arrived from across the sea, they're not bad people. They're just forerunners. But if we let them here, eventually it will completely change and destroy a good part of our country, the place where we live, and also just our way of life will also be annihilated, where pretty much it'll just be nothing but the Norse here, because they're using Norse as a catch-all term for like everybody from across the sea. So just Norse is Europeans from their perspective, but like, if we leave them here, eventually more of them will come and they will completely destroy our way of life. Like, I saw that. I saw horrible weapons that I can't even believe were created by mankind, but apparently they were. Weapons that could harness the power of the sun itself. Like, this is insanely powerful. So I don't know if the shaman explained this to Polmuk's tribe yet, because we haven't really gotten their input on it at all. But if he has, we're probably going to find out more about that in the next chapter when Thorfinn arrives back. And I don't think it'll be as direct as that, because the people of Markland probably did not have a relationship with the indigenous tribes of the area the same way that the Vinland settlers did, So maybe they were just playing it like, hey, we're just going to observe the Markland settlers and see what they're going to do. And then the shaman arrived and said the whole thing of what he heard what he saw in the vision. And then the indigenous tribes around there are like, oh, screw that. We don't want any part of that. And then they fired the arrows. Now, did they kill the Markland settlers? I don't think they did. I think they probably just left. I think they probably scared them with the arrows, and maybe like they sent out a party of like, they had like spears and, arrows, and they were like ready to attack. And then the Markland settlers got spooked by that, and they ran and they got on a boat and they sailed maybe further north, maybe further south, and then maybe found another place to settle, or just at least camp that wasn't as dangerous as that settlement. Like, they had to get out of that settlement. The other idea is that they were all captured, which there was only 13 of them, and I think some of them were kids, so Probably, and they didn't have weapons. So the idea that the indigenous tribe around there could have like captured them and brought them back to their settlement, not that ridiculous either. But what happened to the boat? I guess they could have just sunk the boat. But you think there would have been like wreckage or like a trace of that if they would have sunk the boat? I'm not really sure. So I feel like the Markland settlers did escape. They just went somewhere else and they're like on the edge there. Maybe they went back to Helluland and they're just living in the crags of that place because it's like, okay, well, at least there's no Lanu around here that are going to try to like attack us, right? So it could be a situation with that as well. So I think when they go back to, I think next chapter they're going to be arriving back at Vinland, and then like Einar and Gudrid are going to be there, and it's been like I said, it's been 16 days since Thorfinn left, and it's going to be like, we have a problem, and it's like, what? It's like, well, Polmuck's group came to us like shortly after you guys left, like 16 days ago. He arrived, and they were explaining some stuff, and there's still a little bit of a language barrier, but you know, Bug Eyes is there, he knows a little bit, so like kind of explaining the situation of how this prophecy is going to come to pass, and it's like it's very dangerous for us to be there. So the tensions between Polmuck's group and the Vinland settlers, I don't think it'll be completely destroyed, but it'll be tense. It'll be like wow, we're having a good time here, and we're getting along, and we're exchanging ideas, and you're peaceful, and we're peaceful, and everything seems to be going good. And then the shaman is like, if they stay here, our entire way of life is going to be annihilated. There's weapons beyond our wildest possibilities. There are these giant machines that dig up the earth, these giant towers that billow black smoke into the sky. And then they're like, oh, and the Lanu are like, oh, shit, that's not good. And also, these are people that, as like they said when they first arrived, one of the first things that happened when the Vinland settlers arrived is they cut down the trees to make room for fields. And the Lanu, they've never farmed like that. So they're like, but if they cut down all the trees, then we won't have any food to eat. So all the animals are going to leave. You know, why are they doing this? This could really damage our island if they keep cutting down all the trees, right? And so it's going to be a thing. So historically, Thorfinn Karlsefni's journey to the west ended with an attack by the indigenous people, and he ended up having to leave, going back, retreating to Greenland or Iceland. I'm really hoping that doesn't happen in Vinland, because, like I said, I really want Thorfinn's story to have a happy ending, and it sort of already did, but now it's like, well, that's the happy ending, but here's the bonus ending that is historically accurate. I mean, there's already been some stuff that Makoto Yukimura has changed around, but for the most part, it is very much so, like, in history. You know, they arrived at one settlement and they traveled to another settlement. I think this place is a little bit further south. I don't know if the actual settlement is on Prince Edward Island, but it's around Newfoundland, around that area. So I don't know, but I will say this much. That cenotaph that was erected at the beginning of the chapter, I think there's going to be an epilogue chapter that's going to take place, because it's like a 1,000-year voyage. This chapter, the way that I think how old Thorfinn is right now, I think this year is around 1015, 1020. Actually, no, it has to be more than that. It's probably like 1020, 1025, something like that. And 1,000 years from then is 2022 or 2020 is where we're at right now. So I don't think it's that hard to really tell that cenotaph is going to be there for the rest of time. You know, so the last chapter might actually have Yukimura like arriving at the location like a modern human being. Maybe not, he's not actually called Makoto Yukimura, but he's a dude that like he draws himself like as like a tourist arriving at the area and like looking at this old cenotaph, and there's like a tour guide there, and it's like, yes, this is the cenotaph that was placed here by the Vikings over 1,000 years ago during their settlement. However, as far as we can tell, the negotiations with the local indigenous tribes broke down, and they had to retreat back to Iceland. But there is evidence to their being here, the same as there is evidence. There are like traces of like houses and like artifacts and stuff up in it's the Meadow. I forget the name, but it's like some area called the Meadow, and that's where like the houses and stuff were placed, you know, during Thorfinn Karlsefni's, the historical Thorfinn Karlsefni's voyage to the New World. So I think that'll be a beautiful way to end the manga, how it's being established now, and the chapter 1 of the 1,000-year voyage, here's the cenotaph, and however many chapters this is going to take, 20, 30, 40, however many chapters, I don't think it'll last that long, but, you know, we get the last chapter, and the last scene is the cenotaph in modern day in 2022 or 2023, and it'll have the peace runes on there to mark this was their attempt at peace. And Did they succeed? Well, I don't know. It depends on how rosy of an outlook we want that Makoto Yukimura is going to do here. But a lot of cool stuff coming down the pipeline here, and I'm really excited for the next chapter, which should be out by the end of this month. Just wanted to do something a little different for this one. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. This will be Tekking and Barry signing out. I don't have a Norse sword, so this is the Master Sword, the closest thing I have. Everything else is katanas or buster swords. So here we go. Thanks for watching. Signing out.